Hi everyone, welcome to Java Techie. Are you ready to master in core Java and ace your next interview? If yes, you have come to the right place. In today's video, we have compiled a series of challenging core Java interview questions and comprehensive answers that will help you sharpen your skills and boost your confidence. We'll cover the fundamental concepts, advanced topics, and practical example that will give you the confidence to tackle any Java interview. Okay? Alright. So without any further delay, let's get started. Even though you are fresher or experienced, it does not matter. If you show Java in your profile, the first question from interviewer, what is the pillar of OOPS concept? So you should be very strong in this OOPS concept, which is nothing object oriented programming language, and this is one key component in Java. So pillar of OOPS concept: encapsulation, inheritance, polymorphism, and abstraction. Encapsulation means binding all field as a single entry. So you need to follow certain rules to achieve this encapsulation. You need to define all the attribute as private, and you need to use all public exposed method, which is getter and setter method. And usually inheritance we use to reuse all the property of parent in our child. You can go with class and interface in the same type. If it is a class or interface, you can go with extends. If the type is different, you can go with implements. The next, polymorphism. Poly means single with multiple implementation, okay, which is nothing our overloading and overriding. So if you know what is overloading and overriding, you will able to answer about this polymorphism, okay. And the next is abstraction. Abstraction means hiding the implementation to the end user, give them only the functionality. So I'll show you in the code what exactly this encapsulation, inheritance, polymorphism, and abstraction. Now the next question you will get, where did you use this concept in your project? So to answer this question, already I created one small POC so that I can show you all the implementation of OOPS. Okay. Usually we do use encapsulation in real time in one of our entity or DTO class. So if you will go to this entity package, this is what inventory service. I just created a couple of class to show you about this OOPS principle. Now if I'll go inside this entity class, I have the all the field which is private, and I have only getter and setter method. Now whoever want to access this item class attributes, he need to create the object of it, and he need to call this get method. We are not providing the constructor here. That's what the encapsulation, right? And the next is inheritance. Now usually we follow inheritance in our service or DAO class. So if you go to the service, we have couple of abstract method in our service interface, and we have their implementation, inventory service IMPL. Okay, you can see here. Now this inventory service is parent for me, and I have one implementation which is inventory service IMPL. In future, if same method want to access by some other class, he need to directly create a class and need to implement from this service, right? That's what the reusability. And the next question is polymorphism. Usually we write polymorphism, or we can say we are using overloading and overriding widely. If you know what is overloading and overriding, the purpose of using overloading, having the same method signature but the argument is different. So if you observe here, there can be a scenario to add a single item, and there can be a scenario to add a list of item. So if you observe, this is what the method overloading we are using in our project. So this is just one of the simple scenario I am explaining. You need to explain to the interviewer based on your project or your code base, okay. And similarly, there is another example of overloading. You can see this remove item. You can either remove item directly by passing the argument as a object, or you can directly remove the item by id. Similarly, if you observe, there is couple of another overloading. You can search item based on the item name, or you can search the item based on the item name and its color, or you can search the item based on item name, color or price. So you can consider these three as a overloaded method. Okay, fine. So we understand what is overloading, and we understood couple of example or couple of method signature, right? Now where did you use overriding? Now if you'll go to this interface, we have this add item. Now if you'll go to this implementation, we just override. It means we are just accessing the property of our parent. So override always happen in different class if that those class have the inheritance. Okay, so the purpose of using this overriding to reuse the property, and in case of overriding, all the signature of method should be same. So if you observe in parent class, go to this service which is our interface. If you see this signature add item, it have only one argument, it have list of argument. And if you check in your implementation class, the method signature should be same. There is some certain scenario where you can find there is multiple way of overriding. So let's assume this is one class, right? If your parent, which is your inventory service, if this is returning some interface, then in your implementation class you can return any implementation of it. So what I'll do, for example, let me show you. Let me create one dummy interface called a. Okay, Java class a. I'm not writing any logic here, and I have one class called b. Now let's assume this b extends from a. Fine. Now let's assume in this inventory service the argument is returning the superclass which is a and the child class is b. Okay. Now if I will go to my inventory service IMPL, here instead of let's remove this, here I can return a object. Also I can return the b object because b is the subclass of a. This is one of the tricky scenario you will find in interview. They will try to confuse in case of overriding. Okay, so you need to remember, if you are returning any parent object as a return type in your interface or class, then in your implementation you can return child object of it. Okay, so this is what one of the tricky question. So I hope this concept is clear for you. Apart from that, if you'll go to the controller, I guess, yeah, if you'll go to the controller, we are not injecting the implementation class. We are just injecting the interface, right? That's what the dynamic polymorphism, or we can say runtime polymorphism. Because if you observe, I may have multiple implementation of this inventory service. Now we have only service IMPL 1. I can have IMPL 2. Now we are not injecting the class implementation class, rather we are injecting the interface. That's what one of the interview question. Where did you use runtime polymorphism in your project? Okay. Now next question, explain exception hierarchy in inheritance. Basically they will try to confuse you this exception hierarchy question with overriding concept. Now let me go through one example to clear this doubt. Let me go to the IntelliJ. Now if you observe, I have child and parent class. Now let's go to this parent class. If you observe, there is a method called m1, and in child we override this method m1. Okay, now the question here, if my parent throws some exception, let's say throws exception, then is it mandatory that my child need to handle this? Now if you go to this child, there is no compilation error. My child is not crying even though parent is throwing the exception. Now I can add here throws exception, or I can ignore it if my parent is throwing it. Okay, now let's try the reverse one. Let's remove from the parent. Now if you observe here, if my child is throwing the exception, then parent must need to handle that. He must need to throws it, otherwise child will cry here. If you observe, add exception to the parent m1 throws. Okay, see here, that is what one more interview question. So you just need to note it. If parent is throwing the exception, then it's optional for child to declare the throws. But if child is throwing the exception, like throws exception, then parent must need to throws it. Okay, this is what you need to remember. Now the next question will be, parent child override scenario. So interviewer will try to ask few more questions on this override scenario. That is also one tricky question we can consider. So let's remove this. Let's assume that I have a parent class and we have method called m1, and if we go to the child class, we override this method. Okay. Now I was creating the object of parent new child, and I was trying to call the m1 method. Now maximum people thought that this m1 method will call from the parent class. Okay, because if you observe the signature of parent equal to new child, and people are assuming that this is the object of your parent class. Now let me run this code. You'll see the output, then we'll derive more. Now if you'll see the output, we are getting child m1. It means the m1 method is executing from our child class because we override it from the parent, we override it in child, and here we are not creating the object of parent. With the reference of parent, we are creating the object of child. That's why we are able to access this method from the child class. Now let's assume I didn't override this method in my child class, and if I'll run it now, first it will check in child class because we are creating the object of child. First JVM will check this m1 method in child class. If it will not found, then it will go and check in your parent class. Now if I'll run it, I'll get the output from parent class. I'll not get any compilation error. See, if you observe here parent m1, if you'll go to this class and we are printing here parent m1, that's what we are getting. If you observe, we are not getting any compilation error even though this method is not there in our child class. That's what the overriding, and or we can say runtime polymorphism. Okay. Now the next question will be, let's go to the slide. Parent child override scenario just to discuss. Now the next one, can we override static and private method? Answer is no. If you'll try to override the static method, then that will consider as a method hiding. And private method we cannot override because the scope of that private is inside a class. It will not visible to the child class. Now if you will go to the IntelliJ IDE, where is the ID? Yeah, this one. Now let's say I have a static method here, void m2. Okay. Now if I'll go to the child and if you'll try to override this, let me add this. I'll write @override. I'm getting the compilation error. Okay. And now if I will call this method with the object of C, now I will try to access this parent new child object and I will call m2 method. It will execute from the parent. Okay, now let me run this parent static m1. Okay, now let me change it to child. Now if I will call the object of child equal to new child, let me do that, child, I'll get the output from this child class. First of all, as this is the static method, we no need to create the object of it. Now from where you want to call this method, just use that class name parent.m2 or child.m2. This is how we can call a static method, right? And it is not overriding at all because this is not part of the instance. And now if I'll declare any method as a private here, let me write something private void test, something like that. If I'll try to override this method, the scope of this particular method inside this parent class, I cannot access this test method inside the child because the scope is private. Even though child extends from parent, he should able to access all the class, all the attributes or all the members, but this private can be visible to the other class. Okay. Now if I will try to add that test, I'm not getting any option to override it, right? So that's the reason we cannot override static and private method. Now next question will be, let me go to the slide. What is the difference of Java 7 and Java 8 interface? So basically in Java 7 we can define only the abstract method as part of interface, but in case of Java 8 you can define default method and static method as well as part of Java 8 interface. Now I can show you the purpose of this default method and static method. If you go to the IntelliJ IDE, now let me go to this Java 8 package. Let's say I have one interface called payment, and inside payment I have do transaction method, something called add coupon method, and if you observe this is the default method, and in default method you can write the method body. Okay, and if you observe there is one static method generate transaction report, and this is the common feature for all the implementation. Since this is my payment interface, I have the multiple implementation like Google Pay, Paytm and Phone Pay. Now the purpose of using this default method to not force to my implementation class to override this method. Now I have add coupon method. Let's say Google Pay want to give this add coupon feature, he can override it. Paytm want to give this add coupon, he can override it. But let's assume PhonePe don't want to use this add coupon feature to the user. So if you go to the PhonePe and I implement it from payment, but I didn't override the add coupon method, I'm not getting any compilation error because my method is add coupon method is default method which will not force to your implementation class to override it. Before Java 7, before Java 8, any method present in the interface, if you implement from that, you must need to override that. Now, since I define that method as default, it is not forcing me to override. That's what the purpose of using this default method. Now, so there is few point you can note that ignore if you don't want to add any add coupon feature in any of your implementation, then don't do anything. Directly access from superclass if you want to use same implementation. Let's say in this add coupon, we need to write some logic here, but I just added some log statement or SOPLN statement. Let's say I just want to give the coupon as a 5 rupees cashback. Now Google Pay also want to give the same feature. He can do one thing. He can override this method and he can call super dot add coupon, or he can directly access it from my interface. Let's say payment dot, maybe I need to create the object of it. Okay, while accessing this method inside the main method, you need to call, let me do it right, let me write it. Okay, let's say I created object of payment uh, new Google Pay. Fine, I can call payment dot add coupon. Now I can access the parent property here. If I don't want to provide my own implementation, then I don't need to override anything. I can directly get access from my parent class. And if you want to give your own coupon feature, let's say this PhonePe want to give their own coupon feature. Let's say add coupon is out. He want to give 10% cashback. Now he can override it. Okay. The purpose of using this default method to not force to the implementation to override that method. Now static method. So if you go to this payment, this is what the generate transaction report, which is common for all the implementation. If you do transaction on Google Pay, Paytm or Phone Pay, at end we are getting one transaction report with a unique transaction ID, right? So if something is common for all the implementation, better to keep that as a static in your interface rather than create a separate util class and keep it better to use in the interface itself. That's how the purpose of using this default and static method. That's how they introduced in Java 8. So far we completed couple of questions from OOP principle. Now let's go to the slide. Now the next question will be what is final, finally and finalize. This is one of the common question. Now you can say final is keyword. Finally is a block which is used for the cleanup activity, and finalize is a method which will be called by JVM in periodical manner to clean up the unused object. Usually when we write system.gc, this finalize method is called automatically. Now to demonstrate that, let me go to the IntelliJ. Now if I'll go to this fundamental, let me close this. Yeah. So if you observe here, we usually use this finally keyword if you don't want your any attribute to reassign or remodify. Now let's say since I declare this variable as a final, if I will try to reassign, it will cry. You are getting make demo.a as a not final. Okay, so final means you cannot reassign it. Now usually we write finally block. There is multiple combination. You can write try with finally or try catch finally. Usually we need to write this finally for the cleanup activity. In real time when we are doing this JDBC connection all result set stream open, we need to use this finally block to clean those stream. Okay. Now since we are using the framework Hibernate and JPA, those streams are auto closable, but as per the earlier implementation we must need to clean those streams, or we need to close that connection. So in that time we usually use the finally block because it will always execute, right? And now the purpose of using this finalize method, if you observe, this method is there in object class. Okay, now what I'll do, I'll just type object, something going wrong, yeah, let's say object. Now if you'll go to this object Java, you will find the finalize method, which is protected, I believe. Let me type, yeah, this is the protected finalize method present in object class. Now once you set your object as a null, or if garbage collector will found some object which is not being used, and once we call this system.gc, it will call this finalize method. Now what I'll do, I'll just run this code. If you observe, this is what the object of my class. I use that object and forcefully I just set it to null to show you that finalize method invocation. Okay, now let me run this code. If you observe, we are getting finalize method called because one of my object is not used in code because it is null. Now let me do one thing. Let me comment this. I was doing system.gc, or you can call runtime.gc, and here my object is not null, it's being hold to some reference. Now if I'll run this, I was not getting that finalize method called statement because finalize method is not called. If you'll do the system.gc, JVM will check any object which is null. He didn't find anything, so he didn't call this finalize method. Fine. Now next question will be, let me go to the slide. What is equals and hashCode method and its contract? This is one of the common question. You may need to remember this, or you may need to practice this while working with the collection. Basically, the purpose of using this hashCode to generate a unique or reference number of an object through which we can easily identify the uniqueness of an object. And the purpose of using this equals method to compare two object based on its content. Okay, and it's not guaranteed that if two objects having the same hashcode, they may having the same content. If hashcode of two object is same, there is no guarantee that equals method of these two object will be same. Let's take an example to understand this equals and hashcode method and its contract. Now if I will go to my IntelliJ IDE, now let's go to the project. If you observe, I created one class called employee, and I have two fields, ID and name, and we have default constructor and parameterized constructor. We have the getter and setter method. And if you observe, I wrote this hashcode manually, rather generated it from the ID. I wrote it and I was evaluating the hashcode based on only one field. Even though we have two fields here, ID and name, and I was just evaluating the hashcode based on a single field. And I was just writing logic to implement the equals method with all or both the field ID and name. So once again, my employee have two field ID and name. I am evaluating the hashcode based on one field, that is ID, and I was evaluating the equals based on two field ID and name. Okay. Now if you observe, employee 1 I created 101 Basant, employee E2 new employee I created again the same ID but name is different. Now if you will check the hashcode of these two objects, you will get same because forcefully I was evaluating the hashcode based on only one field. But if you'll check the content of these two objects, ID 101 101, name is different. Okay, so you'll find this as a false. Now let me run this code. You are getting true, hashcode is same. equal is false. Okay, so usually we need to follow the proper contract of this equals and hashCode to avoid duplicate in collection. Let's say I will add the valid equals and hashCode method. Let me remove this. First, let me not add this equals and hashCode method. What I'll do, I will just create a collection. You know, set will not allow duplicate, right? Let me do that. Employee, new employee. Let me add something the same. Fine. Now employees dot add employee one. Sorry, this should be new hash set or some set implementation. Now let me add employee 2. Add. Fine. Now as per the set implementation, set will not allow duplicate. Now if I will print this set, we should get only one result, right? Because both the object is same, hashCode wise and equals wise, and because we are not overriding it first of all. So let's run it, how this set behave. So if I'll run this, we can see two object. Even though these two object is same, still we set is allowing duplicate to us, right? Which is not a correct behavior. It's because we are not following the contract of equals and hashCode method. Now what I'll do, I'll just override the equals and hashCode. Okay, next, next. Now if I'll run this code, we have the equals and hashCode method. If I'll add those objects to the set implementation or map as a key, it will not allow the duplicate now. Now if I'll run this, you can see only one object. So it's always recommended to override both equals and hashCode method, especially when we are working with any set implementation or hash map. Okay, we'll discuss more about this equals and hashCode implementation once we start learning hash map internal flow in my upcoming video. Fine. Next question will be, if you'll go to the slide, the next question will be, what is exception and its hierarchy? Usually exception we received because of unwanted check, or there will be not proper coding to validate the object, or some, it's kind of programmer mistake, right? Because of some wrong coding we are getting the exception. So if you will check the exception hierarchy, the superclass of exception or error is throwable, and if you observe, throwable again categorized as a error and exception. If you observe the error, there will be a couple of error, which is out of memory error, stack overflow error, and again if you go to the exception, it categorized as a two types: runtime exception, which is unchecked, and another is checked exception, or usually people says it as compile time exception. Okay, so if you'll check in runtime exception, null pointer, illegal argument, arithmetic, array index, bound of exception, these are part of runtime exception. This we never know when we'll get this exception, because we are not getting any pre-compilation warning or something like that. So this will be considered as runtime exception. Similarly, there is checked exception, which is class not found exception, IO exception, file not found exception, SQL exception. These are the checked exception. Usually checked exception alternatively called as a compile time exception. When you will say this term compile time exception, immediately you will get the next question: why checked exception also called as a compile time exception? Is it really occurs in compile time? Answer is no. It's just a naming convention. People are mentioning that runtime exception and compile time exception. Never as a developer we found any exception at compile time. All the exception will raised at runtime only. So you need to convince to the interviewer that this compile time exception is not part of compile time. So I can give you one example where you can prove yourself that this checked exception or compile time exception will not raise at compile time. Now if you'll go to the IntelliJ, now let me go to the exception folder. Let's assume I just want to read a file. Okay, so I wrote a class something called data reader, and I have a file on this path. Now what I'll do, I'll just write buffer reader, buffer reader, new file reader of file. Okay, now if you observe, at the time of compile, we are getting a message or we are getting a warning to handle it. Okay, I handled it, means better I can write try catch. Okay, I am going to handle it. Fine. Now this is makes sense, right? We are getting the warning at the time of compilation and we are handling it. Now you can write some logic to read the file also. Let's say while br dot read line not equal to null, there is something wrong. Okay, fine, add one more catch, then print the content br dot read line. As per the coding convention, this file not found exception or IO exception is checked exception which we get warn at compile time and we handle it. Now if I'll run the code, I will get the message printed in my console. There is some data, random text we can see in the console. But what if I will give some wrong path? Not intentionally, but somehow the path is wrong. Okay. Now if I'll run it, still we are getting the exception, right? And we are getting it at runtime. If you observe, the exception type is file not found exception, which is checked exception, and we are getting at runtime. So it means there will be no exception which will be raised in compile time. So we cannot say checked exception as a compile time exception. Okay. So this way you need to convince to your interviewer that this is not a compile time exception. Hope this concept is clear for you. Now the next question, how to write your own custom exception. Usually we need to write our custom exception. Always we are not going to use the checked exception or unchecked exception as part of our project. Now how you can write your custom exception. Now if you will go to the IntelliJ, I can write a custom exception right away. So what I'll do, let's say I'll create a class, let's say order not found exception. Okay, order not found exception. So to create a custom exception, first you need to extend your class either from exception or from runtime. It's up to you what you want to implement. So if you extend it from runtime exception, then your custom exception will be behave as a runtime exception. If you will extend it from exception, it will behave as a checked exception. Okay. So based on your requirement, you can go ahead and implement either or extend either exception or runtime exception. Now the next step, you need to define a constructor of this order not found exception class. So what I'll do, I'll just write a constructor public order not found exception. I'll give some message because I just want to print some message while throwing the exception. Then this exception or this message you need to pass to your super class. So how you can access? You can write super pass the message. That's it. That is how you can create your custom exception. Just create a exception class or create a normal class, extend it either from exception or runtime exception. You know the purpose of both. It depends on you or your project requirement. Just use one of them. Then just write the default constructor and provide the message. If you don't want to print any message, just ignore it. Pass the message and pass it to the super class, which is your exception. If you'll go and check in exception, you'll find this constructor, right? Exception string message. That's how I passed here. Now write a test class or something like that. Java class test. I'll write some method public void get order or something like that. I just want to show you how you can throw your custom exception as well. Okay, let's say int order id. Usually you need to call the service or DAO. Here I was just randomly throwing some exception. Okay, let's say if order id what is that int, right, equal to 101, then throw order not found exception with the message. That's how we pass the constructor here, right? Let's say order not found with id, give the id, order id. Fine. Why this is crying? Okay, throw new. I need to create the object of that class. Okay, I throw the exception and I throws it. I'll tell you what is the purpose of this throw and throws. Okay, else do some logic. Do some logic. Now I'll call this class, call this method, write main method. I'll create the object of test. Test equal to new test. Test dot get order. I'll pass the same. Intentionally I just want to throw a exception. Okay. See, now itself I will tell you the purpose of using the throw and throws keyword. If you observe, forcefully I was throwing the exception and I was defining the throws here. Now if you define the throws in your method, then whoever will be next method caller, he must need to handle it. So if you observe, the main method is calling this get order method, and from get order method we are defining the throws. Throws means simply you are delegating the exception to the next method caller. Okay, now who is my next method caller? That is main method. Inside main method I was trying to call this get order method and it have the signature throws. It means you either you need to handle it or else again you just delegate it to the next method caller. So you can do it in a two way. You can define a try catch. You can, now you are handling it. Okay, otherwise pass it to the method signature. Now who will call to this main method? He will get this, he must need to handle again. Okay, because you are defining the throws, means you are delegating to the next method caller, hey, whoever will call my method, please handle this order not found exception. Or again you just throws it, whoever will call you, he may need to handle it. That is how the hierarchy. Okay, and throw means we are simply throwing your exception. See, usually in service we get some DAO access exception. You need to wrap it and you need to throw your custom exception. That is how the purpose of throw, to throw the exception from one layer to another layer. But throws to inform to the next method caller, if you will call me, you will get one exception. Either you handle it or you throws it. Okay, so that is the purpose of throw and throws. Now if I'll run this, I'll get the exception. Exception order not found with id. This is what the message we passed, right? So we covered how to create custom exception, how to use it. Also we understood the purpose of throws and throw keyword. This is also one of the frequently asked interview question, throws and throw. Now hope you understand the purpose of these two. If do you have any doubt, then do let me know in comment section. I will clear in a descriptive way. Okay, now next go to the slide. And the next question we already discussed, what is difference between throw and throws. Now if you'll go to the next, there will be couple of tricky exception programming question. It's something like order of the exception. Okay, I can ask you that question. Let me go to the IntelliJ, and there is a class called exception order. Now let me zoom this. Yeah, so if you observe in try, I just write system.out.println 10 by 0, which usually give me the arithmetic exception. Now let me uncomment this. I just typed it in IntelliJ so someone can easily catch there is a compilation error. But usually interviewer will ask this question in notepad or some pen and paper, where you will not identify that it will be exception. Okay, so you need to understand the order of it. Now if you observe, I have a try, I have a catch, I have another catch. As per Java, we can use multiple catch block, right? Then why my code is crying here? Because exception is a super class of all the exception. Arithmetic exception is child of this exception. So parent class will never be a first statement in your catch block. You just shuffled it, it will work. There will be no compilation error. Fine. Now there is no error. But if you'll keep this exception ex catch statement as first, then code will not work, because this is what the order exception hierarchy usually JVM followed. Okay, so parent exception will always be in down, it's not will be in first statement. That is what one of the tricky question. Now let me change it to the actual question. This is how they will ask, and they will say whether this code will compile or not. If you don't know the order of exception hierarchy, then you will not able to answer this. It leads the compilation error. Okay, fine. Now next, there will be a question for try catch finally return statement. Couple of scenario they might ask you, and the next question will be, is final block always executed? So let's discuss these two example or these two questions with code. So let's try to understand the flow of try catch finally with return statement. Go to the IntelliJ IDE. Let me comment this, otherwise we cannot compile any code. Fine. Now let's go to the project, go to the try catch finally return flow. Yeah, so if you observe, there is a try, there is a catch, there is a finally, and from try I am returning 1, catch 2, finally 3. Now if I'll call this m1 method, I should get the output. Let me check the let me show you the output, then I will tell you what is the flow. You will get the output as a 3, because try, it goes to the try, there is no exception or there is no logical statement who may cause exception, so it return 1. That's fine. Now since there is no exception in try, request will not come to this catch. Okay, and directly it will call the finally, since we know finally method will always execute. That's the reason we are getting 3. Now let's assume there is no finally, we have only try catch. In try there is no exception, so request will not goes to my catch, so we should get the output as 1. Fine, we are getting the output as 1. Now let's assume there is some error. Let me write something. Is out 10 0. So this statement will give some exception. Now if you observe, the output should be 2, because request goes to the try and there you will find some exception, then it will immediately come to the catch block and there will be a return statement. Now let's run this. You are getting 2. Now if I have finally here is out, let's say not is out, return return 3, I will get output as 3, because request same flow. Request will come to the try, there is exception, it will go to the catch, and as we know, final will always execute. It will print me the 3. Just add it. We are getting 3. Fine. So there is, once you will say final will always execute, then the next question from the interviewer, is there any scenario where you can break the rule of finally? Yeah, we can do that. The answer should be yes. What you can do, you can write system dot exit, pass the number 0, or forcefully throw some exception from final itself. Okay, now if I'll run this code, there will be no output, because as you know final will always execute. Once you write this system dot exit 0, here itself your code is terminated. Okay, just remove this. Let me see what is the flow. You won't get any return statement. At the end of the return, we are just terminating it. Okay, so that's how you can change the behavior of final block to not always execute. This is one of the, again, tricky interview question, how you can stop finally to execute. Okay, fine. Now the next question will be, if you'll go to the slide, how many way we can create string object. There is couple of string object creation scenario interviewer can ask. And the next, what is SCP or string constant pool area and how it works. Okay, so these 3 questions I am going to demonstrate in the same example. Now let me go to my IntelliJ IDE. Let's go to this project, and if you'll go, there is a, I created one class called string object. So if you can see this code, there is 2 way we can create string class object. So the first one, string s1 new string, of the literal. Using new string we can create object of a string, and also the second approach, string s2 equal to plain string of Java Techie, which is nothing string literal. Okay, so the answer will be there will be two way to create string object using new keyword, and another is the string literal. Now the next question you will get from the interviewer, how many object will be created here in these two statement, what is the number of object of a string class. Now let's understand number of object creation. Okay, so once you write string s1 equal to new string of this Java Techie, because of new keyword it will create one object because of new keyword. Okay, and there will be a second object because of this literal. Okay, string s1 equal to new string, for new it created one object and which it stored in heap reference or heap area. Okay, and because of this Java Techie reference or literal, it will create another object because of literal, and it will stored in SCP, which is nothing string constant pool area in Java. Okay, so this statement is clear. Because of this line it created two objects, one it stored in heap because of the new keyword, and another because of this literal, that reference will be stored in SCP, which is string constant pool area. Okay, now come to the next statement. If you observe here also we are writing a literal string s2 equal to Java Techie. Now whether it is create object for this or not, so initially you can consider it will create one object, but this is not the fact. It will not going to create a object, because that is what the purpose of introduce this string constant pool area in Java. So if already object exists in this SCP, second time whenever you want to use it, you can directly get it from SCP. String is not going to create another object of it. So if you observe, this string literal already present in string constant pool area, and again you are creating the same literal. So that's how it will not create any object. So in the first statement and second statement, total object count is 2. Okay, it's because of string constant pool area. So interviewer will try to confuse you again, how you can prove it that it will create only one object. So to get any reference from string constant pool area, you can directly use the intern method. So what you can do to prove that, just print the hashcode of s1.hashcode. We are not going to print the s1.hashcode directly. Get the object from SCP. So you can use intern method to get object from SCP, which is string constant pool area. Then compare with the s2.hashcode. Okay, see this s1.intern is nothing this Java Techie, and we are getting the hash code of this particular literal, and we are trying to compare with the s2.hashcode. S2 is the same literal. We are not string is not going to create a separate object. So if you run this, you will get true. So let me run this. You are getting output as true. Now to prove that this intern is pointing to SCP, what I will do, I will just copy this. Let me add it here. Now what I will do, I will just print this statement, what exactly it is giving. Now if I type s1.intern, it should give me Java Techie. Okay, see this. So here I'm just trying to convince s1.intern will give me this Java Techie literal, which is already exist in string constant pool area. And second, we are trying to create the same literal. So s1.intern.hashcode equal to this s2, both are pointing to the same reference. That's how we are getting true. Okay, so I will just type it, better to note it here. Intern method used to get reference from SCP. Okay, so I will add this code base in a GitHub, and I will share the link in video description, so you can follow the same approach. Okay, fine. Now the next question will be, if you go to the slide, Why string is immutable? First of all, you need to understand what this term mean. What is immutable exactly? Immutable means simply you cannot modify it, which is unmodifiable or unchangeable. Now, to prove that string is immutable, what I can do, now go to the IntelliJ IDE, go to the test immutable string class. So if you observe string is equal to Java, I created string literal here. Then I am trying to concatenate another string Java Techie. Now when I will print this string, it will give me the Java. Even though on the same string we are trying to modify, we are trying to add some other character, still it is not appending. That's what the immutable. So if I'll run this, it should give me the Java only. Now let's run this. We are getting only Java. Even though we are appending some other string, we are not getting that as a output. Now what happened internally? Let's say for this literal, it created a object in SCP something like 1010 its reference. Now when you will add s.concat this techie, rather than append this techie to this Java, it created another object. Let me add that. It created some different object with some different number or different unique reference. It will not changes in the same object. That's what the nature of immutable. Even though you will modify something, it will not reflect. Okay. Now you might have question why they make these string classes immutable. For time being, let's assume string is not immutable. Okay. And you have something called password, pwd, something like that, and someone is going to change something on the password. So password is string, you added the char sequence as pwd, and in password you are trying to append something, some random number or some value. Okay. Now let's say 5 reference is pointing to this password. Now 5 object is using this password value, they will get pwd. Now if someone will append something or someone will modify in middle, they all 5 objects who reference to this password will get impacted, right? So that is a kind of security breach, isn't it? So to make sure there will be no impact to the existing reference who all point to the main reference, that's the reason they make this string class as immutable. Okay. Apart from that, there is couple of point I just want to highlight. Let's go to the slide. There is couple of key point. String pool is possible only because string is immutable in Java. And as we are using string constant pool area, there will be a reusability feature, right? That's what we learn. We created Java Techie 2 times, it created only one time object. So this way Java runtime saves a lot of heap space, isn't it? Now the next point you can consider, if string is not immutable, then it would cause a severe security threat to the application. For example, database username, password are passed as a string to get database connection, and in middle someone changed it. Now who all ever point to your database, they get impacted. That's what we understand, right? Now the next point you can consider, since string is immutable, it is safe for multi-threading. Since string is immutable, you can directly use this instance in multi-threading environment, so that if any thread is doing some changes, then it won't be visible to another thread. Means another thread will not get impacted with the existing object. And also you can avoid the synchronization. Okay. And the next point you can consider, since string is immutable, its hash code is cached at the time of creation. So when you are creating the string object, that time the hash code will be cached, so that you can directly use it as a key of your hash map. So that's why we can say it's a right candidate of the key in a hash map. Its processing is faster than other hash map. Usually when we add any key in the hash map, it evaluates the hash code. Since string hash code is already cached at the time of creation, it will not re-evaluate again, right? That's why you can get the faster response. Now the next question will be how we can use mutable class, which is something behave like a string, because we know string is immutable, right? Then what all mutable class given in Java which we can use instead of string? So there is two mutable class, we can say string buffer and string builder. Now we might have question why there is two class, string buffer and string builder. even though both are serving the purpose same, which is mutable, why there is two class. That you might have question, right? So to clear that, string buffer is synchronized, which multiple thread can't parallelly access it, where string buffer is non-synchronized or non-thread safe, that can accessed by multiple thread at same time. So you can easily identify the difference here. String is immutable, which is not thread safe, and performance is very high. And string buffer and string builder both are mutable, and string buffer is thread safe, where string builder is not thread safe. Okay, and the performance wise string buffer is not good as compared to string builder. So usually we implement this, means as per my personal experience, we implement this string buffer, not string buffer, string builder, while generating the dynamic query in our DAO layer. So we just keep on appending the join statement or query in the string builder, because at that time we no need to use the string, because every concatenation or every each append it will create a new object, right? That's we don't want. Now to demonstrate the string buffer and string builder, what you can do, how we can verify that it is mutable. So let's go to the code. I'll do the same. Let's say I have a string buffer or builder, anything you can take as an example. Sb equal to new string buffer. Let's say I'll give the same example Java. You just add it here Java. Now I just want to append something. Okay, so this should be sb, and there is a method instead of concat, there is a method called append. So I append the some char sequence, that is techie, just remove it. Now if I'll print it sb, you can directly print the string buffer, or else you can typecast to toString. Now let me zoom this. If you observe in string we added Java, then we concat techie and we print s, we got the output as Java only, because it didn't add it because of the immutability nature. Now because of this string buffer is mutable, we should get the response as Java techie. Now just run this, we are getting Java techie, right? Now if you'll change it to string builder, okay. Now if I'll run this, it will also behave the same mutable nature. You will get Java techie as output. That is how you can differentiate string, string buffer and string builder with example. Now once you explain this mutable and immutable nature of string, string buffer and string builder, the next question from the interviewer should be how you can write your own custom immutable class. We know string is immutable. Based on the same way, can we write our own custom immutable class? The answer will be yes. You need to do some tricky logic while writing the immutable class. So there is few principle which you need to follow to make your class fully immutable. So the first step, you need to declare your class as final so that no one can extend it. Okay. And the next step, declare all instance variable with private and final. Declare private so that the scope of the variable within the class, and define final so that no one can reassign it. Okay, and say no to setter methods. Don't give or don't add setter method. Write only getter method so that no one can set or modify the variable. They can only get the value from the attribute. Okay, and the next step, initialize all variable in constructor. This is straightforward, right? Because you are not providing the setter method, there is no alternative way to initialize the object. That's how define only the parameterized constructor. Then the next step, you can initialize variable in constructor. Okay, so as we are not allowing to write the setter method, we need to go with the constructor approach only, and you need to initialize the attributes in constructor itself. Now let's assume you have some mutable object in your immutable class. Then rather than directly return it, just return the clone of that object from your getter method. There is also few disadvantages of using this clone. I will show you in the code while writing our own custom immutable class. So you need to keep this 6 point in your mind while writing your own custom immutable class. Now let's demonstrate how we can do it. Just go to the IntelliJ IDE. Let me check the class which I created, not this one. let's go to this immutable package, and I have a class called employee. This employee class I want to create a custom immutable class. Means I just want to make this class immutable so that no one can modify any reference of my attribute, or no one can modify my variable value. Okay, so the first step, I need to declare the class as final. I followed that. Then the second step, we need to define all the attribute as a private final. We follow the second step. Now also we follow the third step. We initialized our object inside the constructor. Also we follow the fifth step. We only define the getter method. Okay, now can we say this is completely immutable class? Let's test it out. Just go to the main method, and I'll create an object of my employee class, employee equal to new employee. Fine. So what is that? Let me check. Name, date of joining. So what I'll do, I'll just create a date object here. Date equal to new date. Fine. So I will give the name as something called Basant. Then I'll give the date. Then I'll pass list of string, right? What I'll do, I'll write arrays dot stream of. I'll create new string array. I'll just give couple of number. Let's say 1 2 3 4 5 6 7 8. Okay, then just convert it to list. Fine. So we created one employee object. Now let's verify whether this employee object is immutable or not, whether we are able to modify the value of this employee class or not. Okay, so what I'll do, I'll just add it down so that it will be clearly visible. Yeah, so let's verify whether we are able to modify the name or not, we are able to modify the date of joining or not, we are able to modify the mobile number or not. Okay, now what I'll do, I'll just type employee dot date of joining. I just want not date of joining, the name, right? The first field equal to something Santosh. We are not able to modify, right? It is crying because we define this variable as a final. That's how the first rule we followed, and we are unable to modify the name. Just remove it. Now name is primitive, so we are unable to modify because you declared it as a final. Now date, which is completely a mutable class, right? Mutable, and it is not a primitive, it is a object. Now let's try to do that. What I'll do, I will just get the date from employee dot get date of joining dot set some date. I'll set something called some random number. Okay, 10. Now if I'll print my employee, see, now if I'll print my employee, it should not print me this date with the 10, right? It should print the new date. Now let's verify. Run employee.main. Okay, so what I'll do, I'll just add some number 5. Okay, better, rather than adding it here, I can directly pass the new date here. New date, that's fine. Just remove it. Fine. So we just get the date object from the employee, and we are setting some random number. So it should be date, I guess, so that we can see the difference, right? Set date. Now if I'll run this, let's make it 15. Okay, if I'll run this, yeah, I'm getting 15, which is not a current behavior, right? Immutable means no one can able to modify it, but here I'm able to modify the employee object. This date object, I'm able to modify it, right? So to avoid this date, what we can do, rather than return the direct object, what you can do, you can simply do the clone. Just cast it to date. Now if I'll run this, even though I will change it, it will not reflect. It is not getting reflected. We are getting 2 only. Now if I'll make it 20, anything, still we'll get the same. we are unable to modify the date object. So it's always recommended to go with the clone, or you can create a new date object and pass this date as a reference. Okay, now this is fine. We protected two, name and date of joining. Now how you can handle if there is a list of string or list of object. So let's verify whether how it impacted. Okay, so what I'll do, I will just add employee dot get mobile dot add. I will add some number, let's say 56789010, something like that. Now if I'll print employee, it should give me, if it is a immutable, it should give me two number, because we should not able to modify the existing object or existing variable. But here I am adding something, it should not print if it is a real immutable. Now let's see the output. We are getting this 9010 as well. It means we are able to modify the value of our object. It means which is not immutable, right? So in case of string, how you can do that? Simply you can write collections. Now this one, ctions java util dot unmodifiable list, pass this mobile. Now if you'll run this, you'll get some exception, because you are not allowing anyone to modify. Okay, but that is fact, we are not allowing anyone to modify, but we don't want to give any exception. We simply will not allow that user to modify my mobile. Even though he will modify, it will not reflect. That's what our motto, right? So you can go with collections dot unmodifiable list, or simply what you can do, return new array list, copy of the list. Okay, pass the mobile. Fine. Now if you'll run this, you should get only these two reference, because any modification it will give a new object, so it will not append to the existing list. Now let me run this. Yeah, so if you observe, we are getting this. So there is various type of object, you need to handle it properly. For object you can go with the clone, for list you can create a copy of it and return it, rather than return the actual reference. Okay, now these are the straightforward, these are primitive and wrapper, so we did it quickly. Now what if, let's say I have a another class which is mutable. Let's say I have an address class. I created this class. I have this address class where I have city and zip, where I have constructor, I have getter and setter, everything I have, which is completely a mutable class, isn't it? Mutable class. And this mutable class I am accessing in my employee immutable class. So it will not behave the immutability, because this is the mutable class, and we need to forcefully make this immutable. Okay, so how we can do that? Only this particular attribute we want to make it immutable. We cannot make immutable this address for our use. So what I'll do, first rule, declare private final, then initialized in constructor, yeah, it is there in constructor, right? Then define only the getter method. Fine. Now again we are returning the direct object here. Now let's verify something. What I'll do, I'll just get the employee dot get address. First I need to set the address here, right? So what I'll do, I'll create a address object, address, new address. I'll give something, what is that, city I will give Bangalore, and zip I'll give some random number 1012. Now I'll set this address to my employee. Now as per the immutability nature, I should not able to modify my address object. Even though I will modify, it should not reflect this, or it should not impact to this existing employee object who is using that address. Now what I'll do, I'll just employee dot get address dot set city, instead of Bangalore I'll set it Pune. Okay, now if I'll run this, it should not print the Pune, because I am set using this Bangalore city or Bangalore address in my existing employee. So I should not able to modify it to Pune. If I can able to modify, then there is no concept called immutable. Okay, now let's run this and see the behavior. Okay, so we didn't add the toString here, so what I'll do, I'll generate the toString here. Alt insert toString. Now let me run this. Now if you observe the output, city is getting changed to Pune. It means still this address is behave as a mutable in my employee immutable class. So how we can restrict that? Simply, rather than return the actual address object, create a new address object and set all the attribute from the existing address object. How you can get it? Address dot get city, address dot get zip. Okay, rather than return the actual object, I am just returning one separate copy of it. Now if I'll run this code, I should get Bangalore again. Yeah, I'm getting Bangalore. Now hence it proved we created our custom immutable class successfully, and any modification to my immutable class will not impact to the object which is there. My intention is to create this employee as immutable class so that at runtime no one can modify its existing value. That's what we achieved it, right? But there is certain rule you need to follow. 6 principle. Apart from that, do the clone if it is an object. Otherwise, do the return the new object like this. Okay, so this is one of the common interview question. Personally, I faced many times, and they will try to they will try to confuse you with this kind of scenario. They will try to add some different object which is completely mutable, and they will ask couple of confusion question on same. Okay, fine. Now the next question will be, if you'll go to the slide, that is one of the interest question. If you will go and check the question, which one is good to store password, whether it is string or char array. So my answer will be char array, and I am going to highlight why char array, why not string. So these below key points will answer you why you need to go with char array, why not string. So as we already know, string is immutable in Java. If you store the password as plain text, it will available in memory until the garbage collector clears it, right? Also, if you define password something like string password ABC or Java Techie as a literal, it will store in the string constant pool area, and which is not easily eligible for garbage collector to destroy it. It will always destroy once JVM restarted, so which may leads a high security threat, isn't it? Now the next point you can consider, since anyone who have access to the memory dump can find the plain password or the text password, they can directly get the string and they can misuse it. So it's always also an overheaded, or it's always additional task for a developer to encrypt the password than the plain text. Okay, and next, if you observe, since string are immutable, there are no way contents of string can be changed, because of any change will produce a new string. If I, let's say I define the password ABC, and in future I just want to make it DEF, ABC DEF. Okay, if I am going to append, then again it will create a new object, new string object, which is not a efficient way to use string. Unnecessary, it will occupy some memory in your heap area. So if you will go with the char array in that situation, char array you can set some limit, or you can set the index. You can add as many as you want. Okay, and also apart from that, it's not safe to print the plain text in a log file or console. But if you are using array, you don't print the content of array, instead its memory location. Now let me show you the example. Let me go back. Yeah, so I have a password, string password unknown, and I have a char array password which is same unknown. Now if I'll print this plain text, I can directly see this unknown, right? But if I'll directly print the char array, I can see the memory location of it rather than getting the content of array. Based on above 4 point, I believe it's always recommended to go with the char array rather than string for storing a password. Fine. The next question will be, what is marker interface? can we create our own marker interface? So my answer will be the marker interface who does not have any method body or any constraints in the interface is called marker interface, and also it is called as a tagging interface. And the next question, can we create our own marker interface? Yes, we can create our own marker interface. Okay, so let's take an example. We have the clonable interface, serializable interface, or remote interface is considered as a marker interface in Java. Let's take the example of clonable interface. If we try to clone an object and that does not implement the interface clonable, then JVM throws clone not support exception, right? Let's say I have one employee class and I am trying to clone the employee object, but that employee class didn't implement clonable interface. Then JVM will cry that time. He will throw clone not support exception. Hence, the clonable marker interface is an indicator to the JVM that we can call the object.clone method if it's implemented clonable. That's how it will just inform to the JVM or compiler to add the additional information about the object based on your marker interface. Okay. So the next question, can we create our own marker interface? Let's try that out. Now let me go to the IntelliJ IDE, go to the project. Let's assume I just want to create my own database framework where if a entity is implements my interface, then only I want to perform delete, create, whatever. Okay. Now in same scenario, how we can do the marker interface? I can create my own marker interface. So I created one marker interface called deletable. If you observe, this interface does not have any method body or any constant here, right? So we can consider this as a marker interface. Now I have one entity class. You can create any entity. This is just for demo purpose. I just highlight the class name. I have entity class and it extends deletable. Okay, so it need to be interface, right? Interface, yeah. And I have entity who implements this deletable. Now we consider this deletable as a marker interface, and I will allow those entity who implements from this deletable. Now I created one DAO framework class. It's just a demo class. I write a method called public void delete and I pass the object. Here I was checking if object is instance of deletable, because this object is nothing my entity, right? And entity implements from deletable. If object instance of deletable, then write your own logic, otherwise just ignore it. Okay, similar way, it's just I added for delete, you can add for save, or you can make a common. It's just I want to highlight how you can write your custom marker interface. So just define an interface wherever you want, check whether your class is implements that or instance of that, then do your logic. This is how JVM identify whether your class implements serializable or clonable or not. What all collection you used in your project? So to answer to this question, you can explain this collection hierarchy to the interviewer. You can tell them that you worked on the list interface, set interface, and map interface. Also, you can tell them the implementation of list that you worked on array list, linked list, and as part of set implementation, you worked on hash set, linked hash set, and tree set. And as part of map implementation, you worked on hash map, linked hash map, and tree map. But before answer this, you should know the purpose of each implementation, right? When to go for list, when to go for set and map. You need to find out this, and based on your project use case, you need to provide a valid scenario to the interviewer. Okay, I'm not going in details about the definition of each implementation. You can find it in Google. I just want to highlight few implementation which is widely used in project. Also, there is few more implementation class like copy and write array list, copy and write array set, and ConcurrentHashMap. These are also three implementation class introduced as part of Java util.concurrent package. So this ConcurrentHashMap copy and write array list is widely used. I will tell you the scenario where exactly you need to use this implementation in coming slide. Now, after explain this hierarchy, the next question from the interviewer will be, what is the difference between list and set? So you can answer, list will allow us to store the duplicate object, where set will not allow to store duplicate object. Next you can say list work on index base, where set works on based on the hash. Okay, and always we need to use list when we want to frequently access the element by using the index. where you can say set is used when you want to design a collection of distant element. So the moral of using this list and set, if you want to allow duplicate object, then go for list. If you want to maintain a unique object or unique store, then you can go for set. Now next question from the interviewer will be, what is the difference between array list and linked list? So if you observe, array list and linked list is the two implementation of list interface. Now what is the difference between these two? So you can tell them array list internally uses a dynamic array to store the element, and linked list internally uses a doubly linked list to store the element. Manipulation with array list is slow because it internally uses an array. If any element is removed from the array, all the bits are shifted in memory. So for example, let's say I added 5 elements to my array list 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and it converted to the array. Now my array contains 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Let's assume I just want to remove third element, okay, which is 3. If I remove the third, then there will be two more element 4 and 5. This 4 and 5 need to shift to my previous index where earlier third is there or 3 was there, right? So this kind of memory shifted is there in array list where it's not there in linked list. Okay, manipulation with linked list is faster than array list because it uses a double linked list, so no bit shifting is required in memory because double linked list already maintain the node reference of previous and next node. Okay, now array list is better for storing and accessing data. Linked list is better for manipulating data. Okay. Since we talk about the list, now the next question from the interviewer can be list object creation scenario. Here he can show you array list equal to new array list and list equal to new array list. What is the difference between these two and which one is preferable to use a list implementation object? So to answer that, you can tell them in case of first scenario array list equal to new array list. Here we are directly using the array list implementation which is completely tight coupled, right? In case of second syntax, you can tell them list is a interface with a reference of list or with a reference of parent. We are creating the object of its implementation class new array list. In future, if I want to create the linked list object, then I simply write new linked list instead of array list. I no need to change the complete signature. That's what we understand as part of runtime polymorphism, right? With the help of parent reference, we are creating object of child. That is what array list is a child and list is a interface. So to show that, what I can do, I'll go to my IntelliJ. I'll go to this test class. So if you observe, this array list is a class, right? This is a class and it implements from abstract list. If you observe, it implements from this list, which is nothing a interface. If you'll go to this list, it is one interface, right? So here we are using something like this parent equal to new child, which is nothing runtime polymorphism, right? Fine. So you can explain these two syntax to the interviewer, and also they might ask you why you used string here, list of string. Can't I use any object or can't I remove this? They might ask you like this. Okay, but it's always recommended to use the type generic, that's what the string type, so that my list will allow only the string object, so there will be no typecast issue will face in future if you'll maintain the generic. Okay, so let me comment this. So this can be also one possible question. Fine. Now the next question will be, declare a list field with the final keyword, and he will try to ask you some kind of scenario. So if you'll go to my IntelliJ, I can show you. Let's say I define this list as a final. Okay, now let me remove this. So here I declare the list as a final. Now interviewer will try to understand after declare it final whether you are able to add object to this list or not. Okay, now I added list, add A and B. Now I just want to print it list. Okay, now if I'll run it, I should see A and B as a response. Okay, even though we declare it is final, we can modify it. There is no immutability. Still we can modify, but we cannot reassign this list. Let's say list equal to new array list. Okay, here we are not able to reassign, or with the same reference we cannot create another object. but final does not mean we cannot modify it. Okay, so it's kind of this question, int I equal to 10. If I declare this int as a final, let's say I'm writing here I equal to 11, it is not allowing us, right? Because we are reassigning it. So same way, if you declare the list as a final, it does not mean we cannot modify it. We can modify it, but we cannot reassign it. If you don't want to modify it, then you can use collections dot unmodifiable list. Okay, so this is what one question in final they will try to ask you either in list or set. Okay, fine. Now the next question will be, if you'll go to the slide, how can I write custom array list where I don't want to allow duplicate? We know array list will allow duplicate, but I want to create my own array list where I stop allowing the duplicate. How you can write this piece of code? This is one of the common interview question. So what you can do, I'll explain with the code. I created a class called custom array list. What you need to do, we just need to extend it from array list. Okay. Then we'll use its own method from the array list method, and we'll override the method and we'll provide our own logic. So what I'll do, I'll just override the add method from the array list. Okay, what I'll do, simply I can write a condition here, if this dot contains this object, if this object is already there, then return true, don't add it. Okay, else just add it. So I can directly use return super dot add the object. Now what I will do, I'll just create couple of object and I want to store in the custom array list. Okay, so let me create the object of it, list1 equal to new array list. Create the object for this, not array list. Okay, Control Z, remove this generic because we didn't use this generic. Okay, now in this list I will add list1 dot add, let's say I added 1. Okay, similarly let me add couple of duplicate. Now I'll add 2. Now if I'll print this list sopln, then it should not contains any duplicate because we are using our own add method overridden from array list class. So let's run it. We can see only 1 and 2, right? Even though we added 3 1 object, it does not allow duplicate. So this is how you can create your own custom array list by extending from array list or any linked list, and you can provide your own implementation to stop allowing duplicate. Fine. Now the next question will be, why set does not allow duplicate element? We know array list will allow duplicate element, but we can customize it and we can maintain a non-duplicate object in array list by creating our own class. But why set does not allow duplicate element? So to prove that, I will directly show you the source code of set implementation. So if I will go to the IntelliJ IDE, now let's say here I am writing something called set of string, something like that, set equal to new hash set. Okay, now if I'll type set dot add method, sorry, this need to be add. I just type set dot add some object here, let's say ABC. Fine. Now if you'll go inside this add method, let's go to the implementation of it. Let's say hash set, any implementation. If you'll go, if you observe the object which you passed as a add method of set, it will add as a key of a map. It means add method internally used a map object to store the value, where it will consider the passed argument as a key and value as a present, which is nothing a dummy value. Okay, so if you'll go here, present is a dummy object. It means set implementation internally used a map to store a object as a key. So we know map key will not allow duplicate, right? The reason I will tell you in next slide with animation. So for time being, you just remember that set method internally used map, and the object which will pass as a add method argument in set, it will pass as a key of a map. Okay, if you know the map internal flow, then you can answer at the same time. Okay, now immediately interviewer will try to confuse you, like, does set implementation always follow this rule? It will not allow duplicate. Then at that time you need to answer no. There is some certain rule. If that is not followed by any of the hash set or any of the set implementation or map implementation, then it will allow duplicate object. Now let me explain you that scenario. Let's say I have a student class. Let me go to the project. I have a student class here, right? I have id name, and I have this constructor, and I have getter setter to string method. Now what I'll do, I'll just create this student object, go to the where I added customer list, right? So here what I'll do, I'll just add student object to this hash set or any implementation. Okay, just remove this, just create this. Let's say 101. Let me add some duplicate. I just want to show you the difference. Fine. Now I just want to add this set dot add s1. There is something wrong in my id s1. Then let me add s2 and s3. s3. Now let me print this set. As per rule, this set will not allow this duplicate, right? S1 and S2 two duplicate object here. So it should print only one of them and S3. Now if I'll run this, let's wait for the output. You can see all the three object 101, again duplicate object 101, then the third object. We should get two result, right? But we are getting three. It means set is not following the rule. It is allowing the duplicate, right? So there is a difference. If you are using set with any primitive, then it's fine. You don't need to override and equals and hashCode method. But if you are using any custom object or wrapper class, any custom object like student, then you must need to override equals and hashCode method. So you need to override equals. Let me add it. Finish. Okay. Now my student class override this equals and hashCode method. Now if I'll run this, the same code I am running, I was just trying to print the set. Now you are getting two objects. It means even though you are using set or HashMap, there is no guarantee that it will not allow duplicate. But yes, if your custom object is override equals and hashCode method, if they follow the contract of equals and hashCode, then always you will get the unique object. Okay, there will be no duplicate. So this is one of the interview question to explain the contract between equals and hashCode method as well. Okay, hope this concept is clear for you. Now the next question will be, if you go to the slide, what is the difference between comparable and comparator? We'll not go through the theory. Also I will explain you with the example when to use comparable and when to use comparator. Okay. Now if you will go to the next slide, there is a basic difference. So you can explain. Comparable provides a single sorting sequence, where comparator provides multiple sorting sequence. Let's say I have an employee class and I have field called ID, name and salary. If I want to sort on based on ID or name or salary, then I can go for single sorting sequence using comparable. If I want to sort with the multiple parameter, then with the help of comparable we cannot achieve it. We need to go for comparator. Okay. And comparable interface contains a method called compareTo method to sort an element, but comparator provides a compare method with two arguments to sort an element. If you are using comparable, then it affects the original class. Let's say I have employee class, then in employee class I need to implement from comparable. That signature you need to write in the employee class and you need to override the comparable method. But if you are using comparator, then you can create a separate class and implement from comparator. Then you can use this collections utility method, sort method. You can pass the list argument to sort that. Okay. Now let's understand this comparable and comparator with code. So let's go to the IntelliJ. Already we created this student class, right? Not this one. We created this student class. So let me close all. Go to the project. Open the student class. Now in student class, I have two fields, ID and name. I just want to sort based on ID. So what I can do, using comparable I can do it. If I use comparable, then it will directly affect on my actual class, which is student. So what I need to do, I just need to type implements comparable. Okay, and it is type generic. You can pass your class type. I'll pass student. Okay, now it is crying. It is forcing me to override the compareTo method. Just override it. Okay, let's take it up. I'll add it here. Okay, before toString. So inside this compareTo method, you need to write the logic. Since I have the student object with me, I can provide the sorting either for ID or for name. I cannot provide for both using comparable. That's why it's single sorting implementation. So what I can do, I can simply write if ID equal to object dot ID. If both are same, then return 1. Sorry, return 0 because it's not greater than. Or I can write else if, okay, ID if it is greater than uh, o dot id, sorry, not 0, o dot id. Better you can rename it to student s so that there will be no confusion. Make it s. If it is greater than, then just return 1. If it is less than, directly I can add in else return -1. Okay, just remove it. Fine. Now I added compareTo method and I provided sorting based on the ID. So let me change. Okay, this is there 109, 109, 105, 195. Okay. Now what I'll do, I created a list and I added these three student object. Okay, I'm printing it. Let me run this. What's going wrong? Okay, so we didn't add this to the list, right? So that's a students dot add s1. Similarly, I will add for 2 3. Copy this b b. Okay, s2 and s3. Sorry. Fine. So I created three student object and I also implements comparable and I override the compareTo method and I provided sorting based on the ID. And now I added it to the list and I was trying to print it. Now if you'll run it, you will not get a sorting order. So I just want to show that. See the way we added 195, we are getting in the same order. So it should display 101, then 105, 109. Why it's not displaying? Because we need to use these collections dot sort, then pass this list, which is students, right? Pass it. Now if I'll run this code, I was getting on sorting order 101, then 105 and 109. Now in future, I got a requirement. No, don't use this ID. Change sorting algorithm based on name. Now again, I need to change this code, right? I just need to implement for the name. So then in case of comparable, it's not dynamic. It's always hard coded. Today based on ID I implemented, tomorrow I need based on the name, I need to change the entire implementation, which is not recommended. That's why it's always recommended, if you know you are going to follow a single sorting algorithm, then go for this comparable. Now when to use comparator, let's say I will create based on id and name. Okay, let's say I created a Java class, something called id comparator. Okay, ignore it. Then I just implement from comparator, pass the object as student. I just want to make it generic. If today I want based on the ID, I can use this ID comparator. If tomorrow I want based on the name, I can use another comparator rather than hardcode in the same class or your target class. Okay. So what I'll do, I'll just override a compare method. Compare method, just override it. Fine. So inside this method, I can place the same logic. Just add it. Instead of ID, what I'll do, I'll just make it S1 and second object as S2. Okay. So you can write here s1 dot get id. Just remove this s2 dot get id. Okay, get id. Similarly, you can add it here, s1 dot get id greater than, then s2 dot get id. Like so, this is how you can write for id comparator. Now let's say I just want to write a name comparator as well. So what I can do, I will directly write Java class. I'll write name comparator. Also implement same from comparator, pass the type generic, which is nothing student, then just override the compare method. Here I can simply write s1 dot get, sorry, this need to be changed, or else o1 dot get name dot compare to s2 dot get, sorry, this is o2, I didn't change the reference name, get name. Fine. Now I have two comparator, id comparator as well as name comparator. Now let's go to the code. Let me go to the student class. Now today I want to sort based on the name. So what I can pass here? Simply I can pass new name comparator. There is wrong in my ID. New name comparator. Fine. Now if you will run your code, it will sort based on the name, not ID. So Basant B, then P, then S. Right? Now if you want again based on the ID you want, you can change it to the ID comparator. Fine. Now run this code. 10159. Okay, so let me add one more field so that we can find the difference. Let's say something 98. Okay, and I added shik. Now let me run based on the ID. I should get this first. Let's run this. Okay, s4, and also add that to the list. Students dot add s4. Now let's run this. It sort based on the ID, right? Now if I'll sort based on the name, again just change it to the name comparator. Run it. Okay, it's not working, something going wrong. Let me go to the name comparator. There is o1.getName compared to o2.getName. This is correct. Now go to the student. Okay, so this should be capital, right? Because all the character we added capital and here we are adding the lowercase. So that's the reason we are getting this. Now let me run this. We are using name comparator. Yeah, we are getting it right. A then starts with B, then P, then Santosh. Now let's assume we created separate comparator, name comparator and ID comparator for multiple sorting using comparator interface. Now the next question from the interviewer, which is a common interview question, I can say I personally faced it. So I just want to sort based on the ID. If we found both the ID is same, then I just want to go with the name sorting. So what I can do, so let's go to this ID comparator. Here only you can do this logic. If you found both the ID is same, then simply go and sort based on the name. S1 dot get name dot compare to S2 dot get name, right? So this comparator basically sort based on the ID. If it found both the ID of object is same, then it will sort based on the name. This kind of scenario also we may need in future or while implementing a application, right? Now if you go to the student, let me change something. Let's say I'll add one more object with the same name. Let's say S5, ID is same. Then I just want to add something BIKSH because, okay, add it to the list 5. Now I just need to pass this ID comparator. You can change the name because we are not going to sort based on the ID. We are comparing based on ID. If we found it is equal, then we are sorting based on the name. Fine. Now let me run this code. 98, we are getting the first. Then if you observe 101, Basant, then 101 because. So what happened? Initially it found 101 and 101, both the object having the same ID. Then again it sort based on the name. B, then the next character is A, where it is B, and the next character is I. So he started comparing between this A and I. So A comes first, so he added this element. I comes next to the A, so he added it here. Okay, so this is how you can provide your custom sorting using comparator, which is not possible using comparable interface. Fine. I hope this concept is clear for you when to use comparable and comparator. Now if you'll go to the next slide, the next question will be multi-comparing using comparator scenario, which we just understand. We found based on ID, if it is same, then compare based on name, right? Then the next question will be, what is the difference between fail fast and fail safe iterator? Okay. Now a iterator which will fail fast when you do any modification while iterating a collection is called fail fast iterator. Let's say I have one collection and I was trying to iterating it. While iterating in middle I am trying to modify something on the same collection object. Then we'll get some exception which is concurrent modification exception. That's the reason it is called fail fast iterator. Okay. Now the iterator who allow us to modify in middle while iterating a collection is called non fail fast iterator, or you can term it as a fail safe iterator. The example copy and write array list, copy and write array set, concurrent hashMap. These are the introduced in Java util concurrent package. Now let's understand this fail fast and fail safe iterator with one example. Now let me go to the IntelliJ IDE. Let me close this. So I have one fail fast list. So if you observe in this code, I created one list of string and I added two element A and B. Okay, and I was using the iterator to iterate this list of string. So if you observe here, I was just printing it. Then I'm just printing it and I was adding one more element while iterating. Now one thread is iterating and I'm trying to add something in middle. Okay, now if I'll run this code, I'll get concurrent modification exception. The reason here, internally this iterator used a concept called mod count. Okay, so any changes on the collection will be reflected in the mod count. It will change at end. It will evaluate this mod count. If there is a changes found in mod count, initially let's assume the mod count size assigned to the 0, and here I was adding something, then the mod count got changed to 1. if there is any difference found in mod count, then immediately it will throw the concurrent modification exception. So to prove it, what I can do, let me go to this. Yeah. So if you observe, there is something called mod count. If not equal to expected mod count, then we'll get the concurrent modification exception. Now if you go to this mod count, initially it assigned to 0. If you change anything in your collection, then immediately it will increment by 1. So it lost the actual value. So we are getting the, based on the condition, let me go back. Based on condition, this if will return true because it got changed after adding something to my list. So we are getting this concurrent modification exception. Now how can I avoid this? So to avoid that, just use copy on write array list. Now if I'll run it, we are getting the result. While iterating, I can able to modify. That is what this is called fail safe iterator or non fail fast iterator. Okay. Now we might have question, then how it works on this copy on write array list, whether it is going to check the mod count or not. Yes, it is going to check the mod count, but if there is difference in mod count, immediately it will create a cloned copy of your collection and any update will happen to that cloned object instead of this actual collection object. Okay, so to prove that, so if you observe here, I used copy and write array list and I added this list.add c. Okay, but it will not print because there will be two iteration as we have two element a and b. So we will get these two statement. Next, while iterating only, we are adding one more element. So there will be a next iteration, but there will be only in output we can see only two iteration. It means it's not adding to this list object. Okay, it will add to the copy of list object because it will not print. So let me run this. Yeah, we are getting only a and b because while iterating only we are adding this to the list. Now the list index size will be 3. So there will be 3 iteration, but still we are getting only 2 iteration value, right? It means internally it used one copy object when there is different in mod count. Okay. Now similarly if you will go to the fail fast map, so I created one map called hashMap. I added these two entry and I was iterating it. Then in middle I was adding it. Okay. Now let me run this. I will get exception. Not this one. Let me close this. Now to avoid that, what you can do, instead of hashMap, let's use ConcurrentHashMap. Okay. Now if I'll run this code, there will be no error. 1, 2, 3. 1, 2. But in case of this ConcurrentHashMap, it is not using the cloned copy of your collection implementation, either list or map. Since we are using map here, there will be no copy. So if you observe, we are getting these three as well. But in previous example, we are getting only A, B. We are not getting this value because it return a clone copy of your collection, even though there is a mod count change. But in map, the implementation is different. Okay, there is no cloned copy concept. So use ConcurrentHashMap whenever you want to access through parallel thread. While iterating, you want to modify something, then you can go for ConcurrentHashMap. Okay, so you can see this output 1, 2, 3. Even though we are using ConcurrentHashMap, there is no cloned copy return from the map implementation. I'll tell you how it works in ConcurrentHashMap in upcoming slide. There is some slide locking mechanism difference. That's how we are not getting exception using ConcurrentHashMap, even it is not using any cloned copy. Okay, so we'll discuss that in coming slide. Now the next question from the interviewer will be, let's go to the slide. The next question can be, what is the need of ConcurrentHashMap and how it is different from HashMap? Just we understood the use of ConcurrentHashMap, right? Now to answer this, you can say HashMap is non-synchronized, where multiple threads can access parallelly, where ConcurrentHashMap is synchronized, and you can say HashMap is non-thread safe, where ConcurrentHashMap is thread safe. And just to observe, this hashMap is fail fast, right? It throws concurrent modification exception, but if you use concurrent hashMap, it is fail safe. There is no exception called concurrent modification exception if you are using any concurrent implementation. It can be ConcurrentHashMap or copy and write array list, copy and write array set. Now in HashMap, it allows for storing null keys and value. In HashMap, you can add null key and value, but in case of ConcurrentHashMap, it will not allow to add key or value as a null. It will immediately throw null pointer exception. I will show you that in internal code. Now the performance is faster in case of HashMap since it supports non-synchronized, where the concurrent HashMap is slow as compared to the HashMap. Now let's understand how this thread safety and non-thread safety is there in HashMap and concurrent HashMap, and also just we understood fail fast and fail safe using this HashMap and concurrent HashMap, right? Now let's understand how these two are different practically. Now let me go to the IntelliJ IDE, go to the project. So there is a class I created called custom thread. Now let me go there. So if you observe, I created one thread, okay, created a class called custom thread. I extended it from thread, and I created one map object, okay. If you see, the implementation is hashMap, and here I override the run method. Inside the run method, just print the thread.sleep for 1000 millisecond. Now I was just adding some element to the map. So globally I declare one map object, and this is one child thread, right? Because there is a main thread. This is my main thread, and this is what I extend from thread. So this will act as my child thread. So inside child thread, I was trying to add something to the map. Okay. Now go to the main thread. This is what my main thread. Inside the main thread, I added 100, 101, 102, ABC. Okay. So then I created thread object. Okay. Then from main thread, I was trying to iterating, but another thread is trying to insert something. Okay. Now if I'll run this code, I should get concurrent modification exception. Okay. So if you observe, I was getting concurrent modification exception because one thread is trying to iterating it, which is nothing my main thread, and another thread, which is child thread, is trying to add something in the same time. That's what we are getting concurrent modification exception, because we are using hashMap. And what happened internally, this map apply logs on entire object. Now this map object is logged, so that's the reason one thread is iterating, it got logged, it will not allow other thread to do something. That's the reason we are getting concurrent exception in case of map implementation, hashMap. Okay. Now simply I will change it to concurrent hashMap. Fine. Now let me run this code. You will get the output, there will be no exception. See, we are getting all the record, right? A, B, C, and this is added by my child thread. So whenever we are using concurrent hashMap, it allow multiple thread to access simultaneously. They can able to modify my underlying collection data structure. There will be no exception. The reason here, in case of concurrent hashMap, it does not apply lock on the entire map object. It apply lock on the segment level. So let's say you are iterating it. Okay. Now I iterate the first entry. So since it start from 0, my first entry will be this. So we try iterating this map, this 100 and A. In middle, thread context switching happened. Then immediately it go there and it added another object. Okay. Because you don't know which thread will execute first, parent or child. That will be depends on your thread scheduler. Okay. Then again he released the log. It started adding another entry. Then again it started adding another entry. And what concurrent hashMap does, it just apply lock on the segment level rather than apply lock on the entire underlying collection object. That's the reason we are not getting any exception if you are using concurrent hashMap. So the main hashMap is non-synchronized and concurrent hashMap is synchronized, and hashMap apply the lock on entire object, where concurrent hashMap apply the lock based on the segment. So that is called segment locking or bucket locking in concurrent hashMap. Now if you go to the slide, we understand one more point. HashMap, it allows for storing null keys and value, where concurrent HashMap does not allow. So to prove that, let's go to the IntelliJ, go to the project. Hope this is clear, right? How HashMap works and how concurrent HashMap, how it differs based on the locking mechanism. Now, if you will go to the null key value, if you observe, I created a map and I added key as a null, value as a null. Now, if I will print it, it will give me null null. Okay, there will be no exception. Now, if I will change it to the concurrent HashMap, I will get the exception, null pointer exception. We are getting null pointer exception. Now, if you will go to this implementation, see there is a filter condition if key equal to null or any of them value equal to null, then immediately throw this null pointer exception. But this is not there in HashMap. Okay. Now let me go back to the code. Fine. Now the next question from the interviewer, if we'll go back to the slide, we understand this concurrent HashMap is synchronized, right? But interviewer can ask, if we have Hashtable which is already synchronized, then why we need concurrent HashMap? Because Hashtable is already synchronized and still this concurrent HashMap is also synchronized. Then what is the difference between these two? So you can simply answer to the interviewer, even though Hashtable is synchronized, but the locking mechanism is still same as for HashMap. It will lock whole underlying data structure. There will be no segment locking or bucket locking in Hashtable. Okay, because of this locking mechanism, it's always preferable to use concurrent HashMap rather than Hashtable. So if you can see this diagram, this Hashtable apply lock on entire map object, right? Entire table. But in concurrent HashMap, it apply lock on the segment 1, 2, 3, 4, or you can say this is a bucket of a map. Okay, in each bucket it will apply the lock, not in all object. Okay, now the next question you can find, that's fine, we can ignore hash table, but also there is an option in Java, we can synchronize our hash map using collections dot synchronized map, right? There is a syntax in collections utility class, we can use collections dot synchronized map and you can synchronize our map. Then why we need concurrent hash map? Because either way we are achieving the synchronization, right? Again, you can say if you will use this collections dot synchronized map, that will act as a hash table again, and again there will be a difference between locking mechanism between this synchronized map and concurrent hash map. So this you can answer to the interviewer, you need to convince them. Okay, then the next question will be how HashMap internally works. So if you will attend 10 interview, then most probably you will get this question 9 times. Okay. Now to explain this question, what I can do, I created one animation which will help you to understand this HashMap internal flow. Okay. Now let's say I created one map object. Okay. When I created a HashMap object, internally it create a bucket structure like this. Since initial capacity of map is 16, initially it will create 16 bucket. So if you observe here 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 up to 15. Index begin from 0 and it end with 15, right? So it created 16 bucket. Each bucket internally uses a linked list. So in this 15 bucket, bucket 0, 1, every bucket is considered as a linked list. Okay, and this linked list contains one node. Okay, now if you observe, see the internal structure of node, it contains key, value, hash and next. Okay, so it means each bucket can be considered as a linked list, and each linked list or each bucket can have n number of node. Okay, so and that node structure will be key, value, hash and next. Fine, we created map object. Now let's create few employee object to store in map. So I created here 4 employee object. Now when I put map.put e1 and then some string value, e1 is nothing my employee1 object. Now how your hash map will identify this entry, where you need to keep this entry between this 0 to 15, right? So what hash map internally do, when we internally call this put method, inside the put method there is a method called hash. Okay, it will take the argument is your key, my key is nothing employee1 object. So it will pass this hash function and it will evaluate some hash value, and then based on the modular operator it will identify the index. For example, let's assume this first entry it evaluate index 6. Now simply this entry or this node will go and store in bucket 6. My bucket 6 is nothing a linked list and it store one node. As I mentioned above the high level diagram, this node contains key which is nothing the E1 and value is nothing my DEV, then some hash value. And if you observe, the last bucket or the last entry is null because there is no more element in this bucket, so there is no pointer, so that's the reason it is null. Okay, now similarly let's assume I am trying to add my second object. Okay, and again it comes to the put method and it evaluate the hash, then it evaluate the index. Let's assume it evaluate the index as 9. Now simply this node will go and store in my bucket 9. So if you observe, again it store key value hash, then next reference which is null because there is no element in this bucket. Okay, now third time let me try to add this e3, okay, with some different string. Again it come to the put method and evaluate the hash, then it find the index. Coincidentally, let's assume that it find the same index which is 6. Now if we will go and check in 6, there is already one node. Now in the same entry or in the same linked list, if you will find multiple node, or you can say if in a same bucket if you will find multiple node, then that concept is called hashing collision. Okay, so in that hashing collision, directly my map will not add this entry to the bucket number which is evaluated by this index, right, which is 6. So what it will internally do, since both having the same hash, so it placed on the same bucket, immediately map go and check the equals method to check the content wise both are different or same. So it will go and check e2 dot equals e3. Okay, because already, sorry, this should be e1 because e1 is already there in bucket, right? E1 equals e3. If it find different, then immediately it will store that entry to the same bucket which is nothing the 6. And now this will not be null, this will be the next reference. It means in the bucket 6 there will be two node. This one is the e1 is the first node and e3 is the next node. So that's the reason e1 next point to the second node. Okay, so this is placed in 6 only. I don't have space, so I added it down. So don't consider this placed in 7 bucket. Okay, so it means if in a same bucket there is multiple node, then this condition is called hashing collision. To avoid that hashing collision, map internally use double equal operator to check the reference if both are same reference or different reference. If it found same reference, it will just replace. If it found different reference, then immediately it will go and check the content. Okay, so content between e1 and e3. Okay, e1 equals to e3. If it is true, then again it will replace. If it found different, then it will just add as a next node right to the first node. Okay, now we have one more element which is e4, right? So I'm trying to add this map.put, this entry. Okay, again it come to the put method, it will evaluate the hash, it will find the index. Let's assume it find the index 7. Okay, then that node directly go to the 7 bucket. Okay, now interviewer immediately ask you, let's say I pass the key as a null. Okay, in map I passed key as a null, value as a null, then where it will place, because we cannot evaluate the hash or index based on null, right? The straightforward answer for this tricky question, directly you can say if key is null, then that entry will be placed in the 0 bucket. Okay, that is fixed. If there is null key, then that entry will be placed in the 0 bucket. So this is how HashMap internally works. So you need to understand this high level linked list node, what it contains. Then with this diagrammatic way, you can answer to the interviewer so that there will be no further question in HashMap. Okay. Now the next question from the interviewer you can expect, if you mention Java 8, then he can immediately ask you what is the enhancement done in HashMap in Java 8. Okay. So to answer to that, you can specify initially this HashMap each bucket is used as a linked list. Okay, but on certain threshold it will convert it to the balanced tree mechanism, that will not be linked list. Okay, In Java 8 they used balanced tree instead of linked list, but in some certain threshold. Let's say there is a hashing collision in the same bucket, they found 5 nodes. Then immediately that linked list will convert to the balanced tree, and then it will maintain the balance between the node. Okay, I am not very sure about the internal implementation of this balanced tree. You just have a look on the Google, you will find. But at high level, they implemented something called balanced tree. If there is a some threshold, initially it will use linked list only, but after certain threshold, it will convert it to the balanced tree. Okay. Now at high level, if you want to see the flow of this hash map, I found this image from the Google, so it's not very clear, but you can understand the flow. So initially you added key value to the map, then it find hash code of the key. Okay, based on that hash function, it will evaluate the index and it will place it. If it there is a hashing collision, means if a node is placed on the same bucket where already one node exists, if there is hashing collision, if there is no hashing collision, then simply add to linked list as first node. Okay. If there is a hashing collision, then go and check the equals with the existing key. If both are same, just replaced or override. If both are different, then add it. That's what we understand, right? This is where we have the hashing collision E1 and E3, and it check E1 dot equals E3. So this diagram makes sense, right? Now the next question from the interviewer, which we already discussed, if key is null in HashMap, then where that entry will store in map. The next enhancement in Java 8 of map. Okay. Then the next and last question, how TreeMap internally works. So you understand HashMap, concurrent HashMap internal flow. Now we need to understand how TreeMap internally works. So if you use TreeMap, any object you will add as a key will preserve the default sorting order, right? Then how it is doing the default sorting order. Now to explain that, what I can do, I'll go to the IntelliJ, I'll go to the test class. I don't have any code to explain this, but I can write something. Let's say I have something called map of string of integer or string. Then I'll write map equal to new tree map. Now if I'll add something called map.put, if I'll add here a, then some value xyz, some random value. Okay. Now if I'll copy this, I'll add one more entry. This will applicable for tree set as well. Okay, because both preserve the default sorting mechanism. Okay, so let me add a d, or I will change something, some random value. Okay, now what happened, already one entry exists, that is a, which is key, and value is xyz. Now whenever you will try to add the second entry or second object as a key, what this tree map internally do, it will just check d dot compare to, d is nothing the key. Okay, this key, second key, compared to the first key, which is a. Okay, now this compare to method will always return integer. So not this one. So what happened here, if d dot compare to a, if it is greater than, okay, let me add comment, if it is greater than, then it will just add in the right side, and it will return positive 1 plus 1, you can say. Okay, if it is less than, then immediately it will just add in the left side. And how it will know whether it is less than or greater than, based on the return type. If it will return -1, then it will be the d is less than a, and it will keep inside the left side. Now for example, how it will add, so here d dot compare to a, let's assume we have already a there in our list or key. Okay, it compared d dot compare to a, so d dot compare to a will be always return the positive. Okay, so simply it will add just right side to it, d. Okay, now let me add something, uh, let's say this is b, some value. Now again it will compare b dot compare to A. So B dot compare to A, not B, yeah, B. It will compare with the D, right? B dot compare with the D will return -1. Okay, so it will just add before to the B, sorry, D. Okay, there will be one additional, yeah. So it will just compare each object or each key, and it will find if it is return the compare to method return +1, that then it will simply add in right side. If it return -1, then it will simple add in the left side. So this is how it works. Now what I'll do, I'll just print this map, sys out this map. Now let me run this. We're getting first A, then B, sorry, this one A, B and D, right, key value. So it's sorting based on the key. So B is greater than A, so it placed in right side, and D is greater than B, right, so it placed in right side. You just shuffle the order and try to understand the flow. Okay, yeah. So there is few more collection interview question. I will cover that in my next tutorial with Java 8 features. That's all about this particular video, guys. Thanks for watching this video. Meet you soon with a new concept.